The plague of leadership. But before I start, I'm so grateful. Thank you, Nancy. What a privilege to be here with you. You share for a few minutes. And this is in my heart, talking about the plague of leadership. According to the dictionary, a plague is a common affliction. It's a calamity. That's what a plague is. We know very well what that is. There have been many plagues throughout history, but the two more common and well-known are, of course, the bubonic plague, that in the 14th century killed almost 1/3 of the European population. It was amazing. And then in 1917, then came the Spanish flu that killed about 25 million people. So those were very well-known plagues. And today the PowerPoint is going to be my best friend, because whatever word that you don't understand because of my accent, you'll be able to understand because you read it, okay? In Bible terminology, plague is always descriptive of God's judgment. That's what it is, always descriptive of his judgment. And the word plague, interesting, appears about 103 times in the Bible. Besides the plagues in Egypt, many times God sent various plagues to his own people, usually to turn them back to righteousness. That was his purpose, to turn his people back to righteousness. Leprosy, very well-known plague in the New Testament. Even the Apostle Paul was called a leper. He was called a leper. The Jews referred to him as a plague. He was a creator of dissension. Wonderful creator of dissension, by the way, right? But today I want to speak to you about a plague that is more widespread than any other plague combined. This plague is common among many people, but especially among those in leadership in the church. The plague that I want to talk to you about. This plague is really, really obvious in many pastors, in many leaders. As a matter of fact, many pastors are chronic sufferers of this plague. And that's why it's so important, so interesting for us to know about this particular plague. So I pray to the Lord that the Holy Spirit will enlighten the eyes of our understanding so that we can somehow understand what we are talking about. In the few minutes that we have together, I would like to define the plague with you. I would like to diagnose that plague. And I would also like, the most important thing, determine how we can be delivered from it, if it is that we suffer it, okay? I'm not saying that we all do, but it could be. So let's begin by defining this plague. What is it? What is this plague I'm talking about? What is the one thing that we have to battle against the hardest? What is that one thing? I can describe it in one word. And that word would be cardiosclerosis. I was trying to translate it from Spanish. It's almost the same. Cardiosclerosis. And according to the medical field, cardiosclerosis is the thickness of the muscle of your heart. It is the hardening of the heart. That is what cardiosclerosis is according to the medical field. The plague of leadership that I want to talk to you about today is the sin of a hardened heart. Talking about the leaders of the church. Exodus describes Pharaoh as having a hardened heart. And in Chronicles and Daniel, then also refers to someone else called Nebuchadnezzar. Yesterday I had to call Leo, my son. I said, Leo, please tell me how to say Nabucodonosor in English. He got tired. You know what he did? He sent me, those voice recording all that. He said, Mom, just listen to this recording, please. Nebuchadnezzar. Whatever. So you know who I'm referring to, right? And Chronicles says, referring to Nebuchadnezzar, he hardened his heart against the Lord. And then Daniel says, talking about Nebuchadnezzar. His heart was lifted up and his spirit hardened. Was talking about these two men from the Old Testament. But then something really fascinating, something really fearful at the same time happens in the New Testament. And in the New Testament, referring to Christ's disciples, the Bible uses exactly the same terminology. And it's talking about his disciples. Not some king far away, but it's talking about the Lord's disciples. And Mark 6:52 says, "For they consider not the miracles of the loaves, for their heart was hardened." And then in Mark 8:17, it reads, aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, "Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened?" This is the Lord telling his disciples, are your hearts hardened? What happened? Fuller University held a survey, and the statistics in that survey show the reality of the hardening of the leaders' heart. It talks about the reality of the hardness of the heart, which is sadly a reality today. Look at the survey quickly. 80% of the pastors said that their work had affected their family life greatly. 33% said that being a pastor has proven to be a real inconvenience. 75% reported having one big crisis every month. 70% have a lower self-esteem now than they did when they started ministering. 40% of them admitted having a problem with a list person in church almost every week. And 70% of them do not have a close friend. Just proof of the reality and the possibility that our hearts could harden just because of what we have chosen to do, which is serve our Lord. Having a hardened heart is synonymous with arrogance. Having a hardened heart is synonymous with pride, with egotism, with selfish ambition. That's what it is. Proverbs 28:14. Blessed is the man who always fears the Lord, but he who hardens his heart falls into trouble. And I'm sure you say, Mirta, wait, you got it all wrong. You were not invited to have a life unit for newborn believers. This is for people in leadership. So you got it all wrong, woman. This is not the place. Stay with me, because it is to people in leadership, it is to pastors that I want to talk with today. How can the Lord bless his people? How can he do it if their pastors or their leaders' heart are unmovable? How can he do that? How can he bless his people if we don't keep our hearts in check? Is that right? Keep our hearts in check. Cardiosclerosis. Cardiosclerosis is a long process. In other words, a person doesn't come the next morning and his heart is hardened. The day before it was okay, but today it is hardened. It is a long process. Even medically speaking, it takes some time to do that, to really come to the point of cardiosclerosis. Let me give you an example. And what better an example than me? I'll give you my own example. Remember, years ago. So they both came to church. They were single. So we walked them through their relationship before they got married. And then they got married. And they were faithful servants. And we loved them. And we covered them. And we gave them all. Everything we had, we just gave it to them with a tender heart. But then all of a sudden they left. No excuse. They just left. And my heart hardened a little bit. Time passed. And someone else came to church. He had no place to live. So Roberto said, let's give him this room here. So we prepared that room in church. It became a dormitory. It became a room for him. And he had time to be there as long as he needed to be. And my husband would go all the way to downtown Miami every Sunday morning to pick them up and take them all the way to the other side of the city to be at church. And then after church, they would go with us to have lunch in my house, which was on the other extreme. And after that, we'll go back to church for the Sunday night service. But at the end of the service, Robert would go back to downtown Miami to drop him back off. But time passed, and then they forgot about it. And they also left. But this time, these people left with a split. And my heart hardened a little more. I couldn't see it. I couldn't perceive it. I couldn't perceive it. But it was happening. It was happening. In the heart of a pastor, it was happening. And like that, I could tell you so many stories. Like this young girl, remember, Jabel? And I love her dearly. Because to me, she was like my daughter. So I spent so much time mentoring her. I spent so much time trying to pour of myself into her. And I would give her every opportunity to serve at church. I always thought, this girl has a future and a call. But when the time came, she also just walked out of the church and left us without first criticizing the pastor, the church, the congregation, and myself, of course. And this time, my heart hardened a little more. It really hardened so much. It was really difficult. That is the process of cardiosclerosis that could happen to someone, especially to those people who really get involved and give everything they have to serve the Lord. And every time, after all those things happened to me, every time someone else came to church with the same accent, maybe the same look, maybe the same appearance as the other girl who I had mentioned, who I had mentored, of course, this would go through my head. What if she does the same thing that this other girl did? Should I give myself to her? Should I do that? I feel ashamed to say it, but that is exactly what happened to me. I would ask myself over and over again. I want to go back to the life of Jesus and his disciples in the book of Mark, as we read. That day, the Lord decided to take his disciples to a quiet place. He took them to the quiet place, but a lot of people follow. And when a lot of people follow, the Lord felt compassion. Many hours had passed. They were hungry. They were hungry. They wanted to eat. So up to now, the disciples had been seeing nothing but Jesus do miracles. They had seen him do miracle after miracle. But now, right now, they will go from the classroom to the lab. The Lord wanted them to practice. He said, you give him to eat. Come on, you give him to eat, he said. That's exactly what he wanted. He pushed them. He really pushed them. And all they could do was come up with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Thank God that the Lord blessed the food. So he was able to feed 5,000. Jesus wanted to teach them. He wanted to teach them what he could do through them, not just for them. That's why this was so important for the Lord. And that's why he was trying to push them. They would not just preach, but they would also fulfill people's needs. That's what the Lord wanted for them. But you know what? They were inadequate for ministry. Because for ministry, the odds are always 5,000 to 7. That's reality. That's reality when it comes to serving and ministering to the Lord. Ministry will always be beyond our own abilities, beyond our own gifts, beyond our own talents. Ministry is always beyond everything except radical trust in Jesus. Radical trust in him. So if we pay attention for a moment to the disciples' hands, to the disciples' heads, and to the disciples' hearts. I like to see that with you for a moment. They had given Jesus their hands. They had forsaken everything. They had forsaken their families and their homes and their dreams just to follow the Lord. They really put their hands to work. They had forsaken, so they had given Jesus their hands. As leaders, we do the same. Many of us have been doing it for many years, giving him our careers, our dreams, our everything, just to give him our hands. The disciples had given Jesus their hands, and they also gave him their head. They sat at his feet. They listened to every word. They have pretty good knowledge. And we as well. We think we know a lot. We think we know. We sit at his feet and we hear and we think that everything is okay because we have studied and we have prepared. The disciples had not given Jesus their heart at that moment. They had their hands, yes. Their heads, yes. But their hearts, no. They had not given him their hearts yet. They read that they did the right thing, and they also came up to the right conclusions many times, but they were powerless. They were absolutely powerless to accomplish the supernatural. That's why they couldn't feed the 5,000. We have hardened, and listen to this please, we have hardened our hearts when we serve ourselves. We have hardened our hearts when we use God's people to serve us. We have hardened our hearts when we just like what the church can do for us. That's when we're in danger of hardening our hearts. I hope you can hear me. Listen to what Henry Blackaby said. I love this phrase. The people are not there to help you become a successful pastor. You're there by divine assignment to work with God to bring his people to their full potential in knowing and doing the will of the Lord for his glory. Beautiful. We have defined the plague, but let's diagnose the plague now. And there's no better way to diagnose than looking at symptoms. So the first symptom of a hardened heart is ambition. That is the first symptom, ambition. The disciples had recognized Jesus as the Messiah. They have. They really had. They knew he was the Messiah. So they expected to gain power. They expected to gain prestige. They expected to gain popularity by associating with Jesus. That's what they expected. They had ambition. They did. They didn't understand the whole thing at the beginning. They really didn't. Without Jesus, they were of no significance. That's how they were. You know, since we were kids, we were taught to be number one, to be champions, right? To succeed. That's why ambition can easily get into our hearts. It's so easy for that to happen. So that's why we want the bigger church. We want to be recognized in our city. We want everybody to respect us. And we want, and we want, and we want. Ambition. Again, I'm not saying that that's your case. Listen to this phrase. Someone called Stephen Sharmock, whom I don't know, said, a proud faith is as much a contradiction as a humble devil. Lo repito en español mejor. A proud faith is as much a contradiction as a humble devil. And it's true. Symptom number 2 for someone who has a hardened heart is competition. That is the second sign that someone could become or have cardiosclerosis. You know, the disciples showed the hardness of their hearts by constantly measuring themselves against each other. That's what they were doing all the time, just measuring themselves against each other. Who was the greatest, who was going to have the first seat in heaven. That's what they were doing. Basically, the same thing that was happening to me when I was 19 years old. So we got married, we went to have, our first pastorate, and I was lost, absolutely lost. So this is what I was doing. I was just comparing myself to everyone else around. So if Nancy would say hello like this, I would try to make sure and say hello just like Nancy did. And if Rosita dressed this other particular way in her church, I would do exactly the same thing as Rosita was doing. So I was trying to be everyone else, every pastor wife in town. That's what Mirta was trying to do. Measuring myself against other people, competing with other people, which is so easy. And that's what was happening to me. There will always be somebody more qualified than you are. Always. There will always be somebody more capable than you are. Better preacher than you are. More famous or known than you are. That is why we have to keep ourselves from the hardening of the muscle of our heart. Because I was reading a medical article that the problem that it causes is that the hardening of the muscle of the heart will cause for the heart not to be able to pump blood. And immediately I thought, pump blood. That's what the people need. People need for us to be able to pump blood so they can be fed, they can be blessed, they can go accomplish whatever it is the Lord wants them to do. I cannot give myself the pleasure of becoming someone with a hardened heart. I cannot do that. I cannot do that. Symptom number 3, superiority. Then it is ambition, competition, superiority. I love to teach, but if I'm not careful, I will think that I'm somebody because I teach. I have to be careful. I really do. My significance, my total significance is not in what I do, but it's in who I am in Christ. That is my significance. Your ability does not come from you. So you should not be prideful about it because it doesn't come from you. If it came from you, you could not be doing what you're doing for the Lord. You could not be doing it. Peter had a problem with the best example. Peter had a problem with superiority. I will not leave you. Definitely will not leave you, Lord. In other words, he was saying, I am better, I am stronger, I am faithful. And you and I know that he had to eat his own words later on. He had a problem with superiority. So how do we fight this plague? How do we fight it? Because you said, well, you admitted a while ago that you had a problem with a hardened heart. I didn't realize it until many, many years later. And you're just going to laugh at me. The first time that the Lord opened my eyes to the condition of my heart, I was walking down the aisle in Walmart. Is there any Walmart here? Yeah. Okay. See, so I'm walking down the aisle with my cart, Walmart. And when you go to the middle aisle, means you cannot hide anywhere because it's the middle aisle. And the aisle is pretty wide. So there comes one of the girls that left me, that I gave the whole thing to, the one that broke my heart. She's coming just at me. There was no way I could escape. But in my heart, that's what I wanted to do. And then, at that moment, I realized, what a poor condition of my heart. How can I continue to help my husband in the work of the Lord if I don't learn to solve the problems of all the damage that had been done throughout the years by unfaithful people? And I'm not saying that the problems are only caused by unfaithful people. Because there are unfaithful people, but there are many good people. More good people than bad. But the reality is that I will have to face that. And at that moment, in a Walmart corridor, I realized that there was something that needed to be done in my life. There was something that needed to be done. So how do we fight the plague? How do we deliver our hearts from being hardened? Peter left everything for the Lord. He did. Peter left everything to follow Christ. He didn't expect for Christ to die. So when Jesus died, Peter's life was bankrupt. And his dreams were shattered. They were actually shattered. The plague had crippled him. It really had crippled him. We do sometimes, when the critics attack us, and when the unfaithful turn against us, and when things that we don't understand happen, and committees do not support what we want to do, we also sometimes could get easily crippled by this plague. Our hands continue to work. Amazing. That's how much the Lord loves His church. And our heads, they keep believing, just the head. But you know what? We are powerless because our heart has hardened. And unless we do something about it, we will continue to be powerless when the Lord wants us to have the full spiritual capacity to do everything that He has called us to do. So, how do we do it? Peter had to make a choice. He really had to make a choice. Would he follow Christ to the cross, or would he just walk away in pride? He really had to make a choice. And we too have to make a choice almost every single day. Almost every single day. What are we going to do? Follow Him to the cross? Are we going to choose our own ways? Or are we going to really decide to do exactly what the Lord did? This is what Jesus said. Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself. To follow Jesus means to deny self. Mirta, I know that. Come on, you're talking to me basic? Yeah, basic. To follow Jesus means to deny my self-ambition, to deny my poisonous pride. Poisonous pride. I love that word, poisonous. I have to deny my own expectations. I really have to. That's why Paul said, Paul, he is amazing. I have been crucified with Him. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live. The cure. What is the cure? Because all we talk is about negative things. So what is really the cure for this plague? The plague of cardiosclerosis, the plague of a hardened heart. Is there a cure? Is there a vaccine? Is there an antidote for it? Because if there is, I want to know. I really do. There is no cure. There is no antidote. There is no vaccine. There is nothing. There's none. If you have contracted it like I did at one point in my life as a pastor's wife, you will have to die. You have to make the decision of dying to self every day. The problem with us is that we know this by memory. We just know, and we tell new people that they need to die and they have to take the cross. But we don't understand that this is a daily thing. I need to do it every day, because if I don't, I will be in danger of forgetting. And when I forget, then things happen in my life and my heart starts to get hardened. That is why if I somehow have contracted it because someone really failed me, because someone at church was really bad, or because things happened that were not fair to me, I will have to die. There is no other solution. Die to self, die to ambition, die to pride. You know, after years of giving, and I guess most people here have given to the Lord and to the church a lot throughout the years. So after years of giving, after years of unfaithful following in the part of others, after years of closed doors, of things that are not happening, and it looks like they're getting worse, after all those years, of course it's easy for our hearts to be hardened. It is very easy for it to happen. But you know what? The wonderful news is that Jesus can soften it. He can soften our hearts. It was August 30, 1997, and Princess Diana got on a car, the car of Dodi Al-Fayed. It was a Mercedes. And the paparazzi followed them, right? The driver was going 110 miles an hour. So he crashed into this concrete wall. And of course, this is a very well-known story. You know it already. He crashed into the wall, and two out of the four people that were in the car died instantly. But Princess Diana was alive. She was alive. So when they realized that she was alive, even though at the beginning they didn't know who she was, they immediately rushed her to the hospital. And when they rushed her to the hospital, they opened her cavity and closed the pulmonary vein that had damage, and started to work on her heart, started to massage her heart inside her cavity. But nothing would happen. Nothing was happening. So the doctor made a decision, and he took the heart between his two hands and started to pumping it, started to massaging it, trying to resuscitate her. We know the result was in vain. But reading about the story, I was just thinking about my Lord's hands. How at one point, and after an encounter in Walmart, he just knew he needed to take my heart into his hands and massage. Otherwise, I would not be here today. I couldn't be here today. And if I was still in my church, I would be so ineffective. So ineffective. So I don't know what your experience have been serving your God as a pastor, as a leader, as a deacon, as a minister. I don't know the experiences you have had, but the Lord is just talking to our hearts about the great need to stay away from that plague. I don't know if it's going to be just like the COVID, and they're telling us that we'll require 3 vaccines. We won't require any vaccine because vaccine will not do any good. All we require is to let Him massage our hearts. So I'm going to ask you to stand up with me. And only after we pray, only if you feel like doing it, if you can look for someone of your own sex, preferably someone you don't know or is not sitting next to you. And if somehow you could put yourself in the Lord's hands, and you could be the Lord's hands for the other person for a few minutes. The other person doesn't need to open their hearts and let you know their story. All we need to do is just pray for each other and realize that that's exactly what we need. We need for the Lord to massage our hearts and help us overcome whatever. Help us overcome whatever happens throughout. I would love to say everything is going to be how do they say in English when you say Camino de Rosas? In Spanish, about the same. A road of roses, just the same. You have the same phrase? Yeah, like we have in Spanish, Camino de Rosas, a road of roses. It would be wonderful, wouldn't it? If we tell you, oh, look, after 50 years of ministry, there is a walk of roses, nothing but roses. But that's not the truth. The truth is different. The truth is reductions. The truth is processes from the Lord. And the truth is that we need to be careful when we want to hear His voice. So I would like for us to spend a few minutes just ministering to each other. And as you get together with one other person, just one other person, two people, and each of you takes a few minutes to pray for each other. Just think that you could be, at this moment, the Lord's hands massaging the other person's heart. Father, we thank you for your word, and we thank you for your blessing in our lives, and for the holy presence of the Spirit of God that is in this place, this oasis. Lord, thank you. Thank you for your sweet Spirit among us today. We just depend on you. And we ask you to forgive us when we had been careless, when we were not paying attention, that this was happening to us, that our heart was getting harder because of what things that happened to us. So today, we come to you, and we allow for you to minister to our needs, and we just surrender all, knowing that you are the only one. You are worth it, and we want to serve you with an open heart. We don't want to just give you our hands. We don't want to just give you our heads. We want for you to always have our hearts. Lord, thank you. Let's go ahead and find someone, please, and minister to that person.